Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. Welcome into another edition, number 160 of Ohio State Buckeyes Live. These guys make it happen each and every week for us. 12:30, no, 1:30. Sorry, I'm getting shows mixed up. 1:30 Eastern time here, talking Buckeyes football with all of you. From the top, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, Steve Hellwagon, of course, from Bucknuts 247 Sports. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Good. Very nice. Kevin, let's start with you. We're going to start recruiting. There's a lot of big picture stuff to talk about that we'll get to later in the show regarding the Big Ten and scheduling and playoff models and all that sort of thing. But let's go to player acquisition, recruiting. June, a huge month in terms of official visits. I'm going to let you just ride with whatever you've got and whatever you feel is important before we start to grind down to details.
I was going to say, how many shows can you give me to talk about this? I'll try and be brief and leave some things for the other guys to jump in on, but June is going to be a big official visit month. Once you kind of accelerated the calendar and put in those summer visits, guys are taking advantage of it. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who takes June official visits are going to decide by July. There's more of a case of guys are going to take a couple in June and then are going to wait and kind of see what's happening. And if there's a coaching change or just some chaos occurs, they still have a couple in their pocket. But, look for Ohio State, especially the weekend of June 24th. That's going to be their big recruiting weekend. And that doesn't mean that they wouldn't have a bunch of guys in for the Michigan weekend or for the Notre Dame weekend. But I think you're going to see more of those guys in an unofficial capacity as they're really going to load up in June, with the 24th being the biggest weekend. But they certainly have guys scheduled. Brandon Ennis for the 17th. They've got guys scheduled for the 10th. So, June is really kind of becoming that important official visit weekend. They're going to have the commits in, as many of them as they can have in. Because here's another thing, too. When you look at travel considerations, and while official visits, travel is covered as part of the visit, you still have guys playing high school football and so on and so forth. And even if you have a night game, anybody who's tried traveling here recently understands that just because you have a flight doesn't mean you have a flight. So the summer allows a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, and with the Big Ten doing all of the big noon kickoffs that Ohio State has, it makes it even more difficult for those guys to get in. I'm interested to watch what happens with the unofficial visits regarding the 2024 class and what Dylan Raiola does as he begins to help build the class. And he's doing it on social media and obviously in group texts and things like that. But I believe he's going to show up on the 24th. I know he's also planning on getting to the Notre Dame game and also the Michigan game. So he's going to be around trying to do as much as he can for that 2024 class, because right now he's got no classmates. So obviously he's not going to be the lone signing in 2024, and it'll be interesting to watch him build that class and who they target and who they're successful at getting and how quickly.
Yeah, it is an exciting time, I think, for Ryan Day and his assistants to get players on campus, to do those visits in person, to get their camp. They've expanded the camp. It seems like they're doing like 4 or 5 camp days this year as opposed to just 3 or 4 in years past. So they'll have a lot of prospects and parents and families coming and going all June long. And to me, again, it's only a good thing that, after COVID, they're able to get back onto college campuses. And it's been going on for about a year now since all the COVID moratorium and everything. So to me, this can only help Ohio State to market their program in person and get guys onto campus and to finish the deal. And I do agree with these guys. I think in terms of Raiola being the leader for 2024, you're going to see some other offensive players follow along, probably follow suit pretty quickly with commitments, I would think.
I want to jump in with 24 really quick, though, too. And honestly, there are only 2 takes on their board right now, in my opinion, and that was Raiola and then Jeremiah Smith, the 2024 receiver out of South Florida. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be takes coming up here pretty quickly. I think they want to see a lot of these guys camp, so that's going to be very important for all of that. But, I think that there's some guys that probably, if they were given the green light, would already be in that class with Raiola. But, you got to do your due diligence. I mean, we certainly have seen times where programs get out too far ahead of themselves and bring in guys, and, 2 years, and some schools have been even more than 2 years in football, and they don't develop the way that they're supposed to, and then you're left with a very difficult conversation that you have to have. So, I'm fine with them kind of moving a little slow in 24, but I think that after we get through these June camps, I think you're going to see some conversations are going to happen internally, and I think some dominoes will fall quickly.
Kevin, a couple names here. Just to throw by you, one would be the running back Richard Young out of Florida, top 5 running back in the nation. Crystal ball projections have him going to Alabama, but is he in play?
Well, Ohio State doesn't have an official visit. He'd set up 4 and then was kind of going back and forth between Oregon and Ohio State, and then he came out a couple of days ago and said it wouldn't be Ohio State. And shortly before we went live with the show, he said it was going to be Oregon, but you kind of got the sister kiss of, but Ohio State is still a top school. I don't see Richard Young being part of this class. It happens. It's hashtag Cruton. It just happens sometimes. Ohio State has Mark Fletcher. I don't think that it's a case of Richard Young suddenly being scared of Mark Fletcher. I just think, opportunities change, and, you kind of have to roll with the punches there. Ohio State absolutely wants to take 2 backs in this class, but unfortunately, that other back will not be Richard Young, it appears. Now, stranger things have happened. Hashtag Cruton. But where I stand right now, I don't see him in the class.
Javian Toviano is a top-rated cornerback out of Texas. Yes, Arlington, Texas. He listed 8 schools. So Ohio State's still in the top 8, and a lot of Buckeye fans are going to get excited about a 5-star cornerback, of course. But is it realistic to believe that they're really in the serious running?
Get them on campus and you have a shot, but 8 schools for 5 visits doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a visit at this point. And, there's some serious bag being thrown around with NIL in the state of Texas between Texas and Texas A&M. And I don't even know if A&M's on his list. Let's just put it this way. A&M is on his list. I mean, he's got A&M, Texas, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, and Alabama. I mean, really not looking at any small fish there. They're not like, 3 or 4 SMUs on that list. So, I mean, he's got the big ends on there. I don't tend to see him in Ohio State's class, but, stranger things have happened. I mean, honestly, he's a 5-star kid that I'd heard very little of until he suddenly dropped Ohio State on his list. Then I had to learn about it.
Yeah, 6 foot, 190 pounds, and number 25 player in the country, according to the 247 composite from Arlington, Texas, Martin High School, right there in the Metroplex, the heart of the Metroplex, it would seem, right there with Dallas and Fort Worth. So, to me, like Kevin said, get this guy on campus and make your pitch. You've got an NFL defensive backs coach there now, and it's time to monetize that, for lack of a better term, and that's Tim Walton. Tim Walton obviously has come from the NFL, and I think that he can put guys in the NFL, and I think that's what Ohio State and Ryan Day are hoping for. So, I'm interested to see if they can get Javian Toviano, I presume that's how we're going to pronounce this, on campus, national top 25 prospect. And again, those are the kind of guys Ryan Day needs. He's shown he can recruit offense all day long and twice on Sunday. But now, to win a national championship, you better have some blue chippers over on the defensive side of the ball as well. They've made some inroads there with Jack Sawyer and Sonny Styles and JT Tuimoloau and CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers, 5 national top 50 players now lining up over on defense, and need more and more and more of those type players if you're going to contend for actually win a national championship.
Well, Steve, for as much interest as goes into recruiting, and it's hot and heavy this time of year, I think it certainly takes a second place finish to the interest in your vacation plans, your trip, all of us wanting to know what was going on in Europe for, 3 weeks?
Yeah, we were over there for about 15 days. We flew over, my wife Amy and I, and we have 2 daughters who were in Europe. One was teaching at a college in Spain, teaching English to Spanish students. And basically she was like the teaching assistant, to where they would bring up words and concepts, and then she would share how it was used in the Americanized version of English, which really, for people who live in Europe, English is becoming, if it's not their primary language, a strong secondary language. And that's how it was. We found in France and Spain in particular that, every other person seemed to have some working knowledge of English, and you need it with all the tourism and everything else that's going on. So that was the first stop, was there. Then it was on to Paris, France, which I got to tell you, worst traffic I've ever encountered in my life was in Paris, France. And 2 things that really stood out, no matter where you are on a street, on a highway, wherever, look for a motorcycle to come whizzing up beside you in between the lanes, basically. So we're stopped on the freeway. We're going 10 miles per hour. I can understand the motorcycles taking full advantage and going down the middle of the lanes on the white dotted line, 40 miles per hour, and still getting to where they're trying to get. But then we would come out of that and we're going 60 miles per hour, and these guys are still trying to whiz by you. Now it's 70 and 80 miles per hour in between cars. I've never seen anything like that. And I was like, whoa, where'd he come from? That type thing. And the other thing in France, in Paris, in a lot of the streets, they have a bus or a taxi lane off to the right side. And so you're going down the left lane and you want to make a right-hand turn. I could never get the hang of this, whether I'm supposed to let them go on from the right lane and do what they're going to do, or if they're going to stop when they get to the intersection and let me make my right-hand turn in front of them. You're not supposed to use the far right lane if you're not a taxi or a bus, which, that's their thing. They have traffic circles as well. That was weird. Went out into the countryside in France, went to Verdun, which was a World War I battle site for 5 years. The Germans and the French went like this, like Ohio State and Michigan, only instead of 3 hours, it lasted for 5 years and was basically a stalemate after 5 years, and 100 and some thousand people killed. And then from there to Luxembourg, where my other daughter was studying. Miami University has a campus in Luxembourg, so she spent the semester there. In the course of the 13 weeks, 14 weeks, whatever it was, she flew around Europe and went to 15 different countries. And would you guys be surprised to know that at about week 10, we got a phone call that she'd run out of money and needed more cash. So her mom, against our better judgment, put a little bit more cash in her bank account so that she could tick off countries 13, 14, and 15, I guess, there at the end. So good for her. We picked her up. We flew to London. I was sick in the middle of this, actually tested positive for COVID. Funny story about that, but went on a pub crawl in London, and this pub was built in 1660. I hit my head on the steps. I'm not built for a 1660 pub, apparently. I cranked my head real good one time going down the steps, and realized that at 6'1", I wasn't built for a pub that was built in the 1600s. And so Tuesday, we're supposed to fly out on Wednesday, and you got to have a negative COVID test to fly back to the United States. So my wife and I both test positive. On Wednesday, I walked into the testing site and I said to the lady, we really need a negative test so that we can fly back to the United States. And lo and behold, a half hour later, we had a negative test. So on Thursday, we were able to fly back on the plane. We wore our masks. We were kept to ourselves. We didn't want to, whatever. And got back to America. I've still got some sniffles and whatever, but I've tested negative again since then. So all thumbs up. We had a great time. I don't know that I'm in a big hurry to go back to Europe. It was my first time over the ocean. And, London, just fabulous. The sights and everything. Didn't go up in the Eiffel Tower in Paris, but to be there, standing around, it was pretty cool. So, maybe one day I'll go back when things maybe aren't quite as hectic, but really enjoyed our time and glad to be back in the good old US of A. I'll just say that.
Did you have to pay extra for the negative test results?
No. I thought about bribing the technician, but didn't really come to that. So
What did you out of there?
Whether she felt sorry for us to send us home or whether we actually were negative, I guess we'll never know the answer to that. But we are glad to be back in, as I say, back in Ohio, back in the U.S.
And your 1600s pub, did you order a Coors Light or a Leinenkugel Summer Shandy?
No. I ordered. They had a lot of local brews going on there in London, a lot of stuff there, and I don't remember all the names of the different beers that I drank. I know in Spain they have Estrella, which was fabulous. Really liked that beer. That was probably my favorite of all the ones that we tried, and it was in every bar. Estrella, it's probably their version of Bud Light, but it's actually good beer. So they, not that Bud Light's bad, but Bud Light is good in mass quantities, whereas some of these other beers, you kind of have to sip them to enjoy them. So Estrella was a really good beer that I enjoyed over there.
I'm placing the negative COVID test in the category of Steve Hellwagon celebrity making its way across the pond.
No. Believe me, I didn't see one person I knew over there. Actually, we went to the Moet Chandon factory out in suburban, actually out in the country in France, where they make Dom Perignon. And there were 4 Ohio State people taking the tour right in front of us. And when they came out of the building, I saw the guy in his Ohio State stuff, and I said, OH, and they were like, I-O. So, there you go. We enacted an OH out in the middle of nowhere in France. But yes, it was really a great time. Not all that relaxing when you're in a different city every 3 or 4 days, but now I need to take a vacation to decompress for my 2-week European vacation.
You didn't bring your driving habits back with you, did you?
No.
Okay. Your newfound driving habits.
No. Cutthroat, dog eat dog. Yeah.
And you came back and the Reds still suck.
That was the one thing is that my wife has a VPN with her work computer, so I was able to access the server back here in Ohio. And when they played a day game, the 12:30 businessman's down there in Cincinnati, it was like 6:30 or 5:30 our time in Europe. So I could watch those games and maybe the day game on Sunday. So the rest of them being night games, we played at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. Didn't get to go to our friend Murph's big European soccer stadiums or anything like that. So, but they were playing games in and around London. But just didn't take the opportunity to go hooligan. Maybe the next time.
Yeah, Mark, the Reds still suck. He went to another country, not another planet.
Another reality.
I'd wake up every morning and see how they lost again last night.
Another plane of existence.
You need a time machine for that to take care of that issue. Need to go back to 1975 or 1990 or sometime. All right, everyone. Ohio State Buckeyes Live. We typically talk more football than Steve's vacations, but we knew that you'd be interested, and we certainly are. So, Steve, it sounds like, again, not necessarily a good time, but a good experience. A little bit of both at the same time. But you can rest there on the porch and get a second win from taking the vacations. I've certainly had those kind of vacations, yes, and you need a couple more days off when you get back. Appreciate everybody being here. Don't only show up yourself every Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern time. Bring some folks with you. We appreciate we've had some nice crowds the last few weeks. So bring some more college football fans in with you. And leave the comments and questions there in the live chat. Willie, thanks for the reminder. We certainly don't need it regarding the horrible incidents of recent times in Texas. Thank you for that. Yes, prayers and well wishes and thoughts and all of that toward the victim families, certainly. All right, we can go in a number of directions here. I certainly want to get into this Big Ten scheduling model that we touched on last week, and then also the 1-2 seeds. We did hit on that last week. I get these shows confused. I think we did dive in on that. Steve, do you have any thoughts about what's being discussed? We've got, since you left, as you well know, the Pac-12 has decided divisions are gone. We're going with a 1 versus 2 matchup. We kind of lined up what those matchups would have looked like through the course of the Big Ten Championship Series going back to 2011, and about half the time it would have changed the championship game. Then we've got the ACC going out to a 3-5-5 model in which they designate 3 rivals, and then they rotate the other 10 teams in the conference every other year. Have any thoughts about what the Big Ten should do or what you think they will do concerning championship game and scheduling?
Yeah, I don't have a real strong opinion. I know that Fox put out a graphic that said that had it been different, Ohio State and Michigan would have played each other twice in the last 11 years. Seriously, I don't think one of those would have been a year when they were 2 versus 3, because wasn't Iowa undefeated that season, perhaps, I think. So they would have gotten in ahead of Michigan, I guess, in that area. But, at any rate, yeah, I think purists will hate this because it could create Ohio State versus Michigan 2 weeks in a row if they keep Ohio State Michigan as the last game, which I think they would. And I think that winning the first game doesn't get you out of the woods. Obviously, you've got to come later, because the winner of the second game is the one that's going to get the benefit of the doubt for the playoff or certainly the Rose Bowl, whatever. But, I know that's a secondary thought, but the playoff is what it's all about here in 2022 going forward. So I don't have a really big thought about it. I don't know if it helps anybody in the West anyway, because when you stop and think about it, you've got to be 8-0 anyway to make the Big Ten championship game out of the West most years, and either you are or you're not, and I don't think going away from divisions is going to open up more opportunities. In fact, it makes less opportunities for Wisconsin, Iowa, etc. to play for the championship. A conference trying to win a national championship, I think it makes the road to winning a national championship harder, because if Ohio State is 1 and Michigan is 3, and Ohio State beats Michigan, and then they have to play Wisconsin, who's 9, isn't that an easier road to the championship than having to beat Michigan, who's now dropped to number 5 and still better than Wisconsin, in the championship game? To me, I don't think that helps your cause of putting the best team into the championship game. I think that team has a chance to get knocked off, and your conference knocked out of the playoff altogether if you put them in harm's way again. So, or by having to play another tough game. But I don't know. I'm up in the air on it. I think the purists will hate it if it comes to that. I mean, you look at Texas, Oklahoma. They've had some rematches in recent years where one team won during the season and the other one won the championship game, and that's all anybody remembers is the one that won the championship game and went on to bigger and better things. So I don't know. I'm up. I'll listen to whatever you guys think about it, but I could go either way, and I really don't. As long as Ohio State's there 4 out of every 5 years, like always, I'm good with it.
I think one of the aspects is that this is a way for the Big Ten to they want the automatic qualifiers, and one of the arguments against automatic qualifiers is like an 8-4 Northwestern coming in and beating an undefeated Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, and people don't want a team like that in the playoffs. This would essentially guarantee that that won't happen. You won't necessarily have an 8-4 or a 7-5 team, and you'll have your two best teams. And Steve's right, though. It makes it harder for that number one team, but it gives you more of an opportunity for that second team. So I think they think it'll balance out, and it'll give two teams a legitimate chance, even though we've seen a second place East Division team make the playoffs. So we've seen that happen before. Ohio State in 2016, they didn't win a division and they still went. The CFP will take who they want, but I think this helps moving forward if they do it, which I think they will. Helps moving forward with the argument, the automatic qualifier argument, and if the Big Ten wants to keep their foot down on that aspect of it.
Yeah, I kind of gave my opinions last week, and I know not everybody's here from week to week, and I went back and forth 3 or 4 different times in the conversation, and honestly, I hadn't really given it any thought since I signed off the show last week. There are pluses and minuses certainly in the whole situation. As I said, my biggest thing is I just want to see parity from conference to conference in terms of how many conference foes you play. Are you playing FCS? What's going on? Because this has to be more of an apples to apples type of situation. So whether or not you're playing divisions, you're not playing divisions, that doesn't really enter my equation as much as 8 versus 9, 8 league games versus 9 league games, having that chicken bleep week, the week before your big rivalry game that's prevalent in the SEC. I think some of those things really need to be more on the forefront than whether or not going divisions or not. I mean, again, it's just really a matter of how you're shuffling the deck chairs, in my opinion.
And then
I like what Tony said. That makes sense. That that again, why would you make it more difficult? And secondly, you get on one hand, but on the other hand, you guarantee that you're putting a quality team into the playoff if that team wins the championship game.
And you increase your opportunity, your chances for getting both of them in as well.
Good point.
Absolutely. There are, if you're just trying to get the most teams in and guarantee that you get one team in the current 4-team playoff, you have to run through each and every year to see when it would have worked, when it would have helped or hurt at the same time. But I think generally it helps. And obviously the playoff is trying to negate the possibility that an 8-4 division champion pulls off an upset in the conference championship game and gets in. We've got a question coming in. C. Minich is here. Any updates on the new Big Ten television deal? Wasn't the Big Ten going to announce sometime in May? I'm not guessing that anyone here has any details, but just any thoughts about what that deal could look like. I got to think that digital media is going to be more pronounced than at any time before in terms of what it means in this deal.
Yeah, I mean, trust me, it's not going to sneak up on us, and that we're just not reporting it. It's not out at this point. They certainly did want to try and have something by the end of May. We have a week left, so we'll kind of see what's going on. A lot of speculation as CBS kind of dropped some of their games as to what does this mean? Well, nothing. CBS still has the SEC deal through 23-24. I mean, there is a way that maybe money talks and what walks, and that they could buy out of that deal. But at this point,
Tanner?
I don't know if I know anything.
I'm good. This is Steve Hellwagon with Bucknuts and 24/7. Let me put you on speaker here real quick.
I'll be muting Steve. There we go.
Yeah, I know there are rumors that this is supposed to be out by the end of the month. I think it would be a bad move for the Big Ten not to involve ESPN even though it's Big Ten fans have their opinion of ESPN. Not being part of ESPN, we've seen it in any sport that has no ESPN contract versus that sport that has the ESPN contract. You get a lot more attention if you are on ESPN's airwaves and on their broadcasts, one way or another. I also wonder how CBS is going to go about not having football. Like, they should be making a huge play at the Big Ten. I wouldn't be shocked, and I don't even know if it's possible, but to have Fox, CBS, and ESPN all have a piece of the Big Ten schedule moving forward, because CBS needs it. Big Ten needs ESPN, wants ESPN, and obviously Fox is going to get what they want and already has. So I wouldn't be shocked to see it split three ways, get the most from each, and then they all have their various digital platforms. I think it would. I'm not for this Amazon or Netflix or whatever, unless it's one game a week, something like that. It's still middle America, and there's still going to be plenty of people who have no desire to find a game on the internet, and so that's something that will change over the years, but it's not going to change next year.
You see, I'm of the mindset of if you're ever going to break the stranglehold that ESPN has on sports, you need it to be a property that means something, that pulls out. I am a huge NHL fan. When they dumped NHL coverage there and it went to NBC and NBC Sportsnet or whatever, and ESPN ignored it. I mean, hockey still had its same fans. It's just not super, it's just not as widespread. I think, I think that there could be a debate on is the Big Ten, is that contract powerful enough to sit there and create that? I mean, obviously you've got a block of the country in terms of the South and the SEC. They're not going to really care on face value. But with that being said, if Ohio State is a perennial playoff team, which it is, you need to kind of be aware of it. I would love to see ESPN try and bury Big Ten highlights in the D block. Do it. Bring it on. I think that there's probably more money, which this is about. A lot of it's about money. There's more money if you go with different dance partners than ESPN, because ESPN thinks it's going to get the family discount or whatever. You do run into the risk. I mean, I remember with the genesis of Big Ten Network and people freaking out. How many people don't have cable and how are they going to see the games? I think the truth of the matter is that the biggest games are still going to be on Fox, Big Fox. The biggest games would be on CBS if CBS were that option. Let's not forget that NBC maybe has a seat at the table as at least somebody negotiating to kind of co-package with its Notre Dame package. I still think that your biggest games would still be seen over the air. You do run the risk, though, with some of these outlets. NBC got rid of NBC Sportsnet, so it loses an outlet there. CBS, I mean, short of putting something on Paramount Plus, where does it stash extra content? So you really need somebody who has ports for all these games, and unfortunately that's ESPN at this point, especially after Fox kind of dumped a lot of its channels in that sale to of its RSNs and everything else to Sinclair and Bally Sports or whatever. So I don't know if I have an answer there, but if we're ever going to see a decentralization of ESPN in terms of what it holds on sports, it's going to take something of worth to sit there and give them the old see ya and see where it goes.
I think that's a very good point. And the last thing I'll mention before I go, I got to run, but the idea that ESPN will only have so much control moving forward, because this is still going to be like a 12-team playoff. So they're only going to be able to put the narrative so far out there, because you're still going to have the top two teams in the Big Ten are going to be likely in the playoff, depending on how they are. And so then the only narrative you can really get into is further down, like the number 3 team in the Big Ten or something like that, or maybe the number 2 team in terms of making the playoff. So I don't know that ESPN will be as important as it has been up until now with the BCS and then the 14 playoff where they have a ton of say, and they're trying to tell you that 3 SEC teams should be in the playoffs. Moving forward with more teams in the playoffs and perhaps some automatic qualifiers, I think their voice, the importance of their voice, the steering that they do, I think that gets negated a little bit. So I'm not saying you've convinced me, Kevin. I would never admit that to an open forum like this. But I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're putting down. I might be picking it up.
Well, the reach and the influence has deteriorated, there's no doubt, over the years. And the reason it is what it is still is because when you hold the game rights, then you hold just about everything. People want to watch games. Sure, they want to see some talking heads, but it doesn't come anywhere close to owning the game rights. So as long as they hold most of the game rights, which they do, but still, to both of your points, the television universe probably a little over 5 years ago was somewhere in the 113 million household range, something like that. And ESPN at its peak topped 100 million homes. So it had reached about 90% saturation. It was down to 86. It was down to 84. And now these reports we're seeing in the last few weeks, another 8 million lost from last year down to 76 million. That's a huge chunk from about 101 or 102. Now, some's been picked up on their digital platforms, but most people that drop cable aren't running to digital, but it has negated some of that, but not much. So, absolutely. Tony, we appreciate you being here. As always, see you next week, Tony.
See you guys.
All right, Kevin, we'll pick off some of these questions. Willie had brought up 2015. So just to be correct, Willie, I know you're excited about 2015 and that the Buckeyes would have played in a Big Ten championship game in a rematch against Michigan State. They would not have. Iowa was 8-0 and undefeated. If the schedules would have been the same, and of course, schedules probably would have been different, but for as good as Ohio State was that year, would not have played a rematch against Michigan State. We also had some questions coming in about Jim Knowles' defense. And someone had asked, there had been a number of questions about the defense, but one in particular, whether we get a true feel as to whether he is impressed with the athletes on the field and really believes that this defense could be outstanding.
Well, we kind of have to get into his head there at this point, which I don't know if we can do. Let's just be honest. He's got more talent at Ohio State than he had at Oklahoma State on star levels. I mean, bigger, faster, stronger athletes. That doesn't necessarily mean that translates. You can just sit there and say, well, this guy was better coming out of high school, so therefore he's suddenly going to perform better. Ohio State goes and accepts a transfer of Tanner McAllister. He was a 3-star, so you don't know, but he's certainly publicly going to say all the right things, because there's nothing worse you can do. It's like, oh my God, woe is us, we're screwed. We don't have the dudes to do this, abandon ship. So, we're never going to hear that in public. But even from the things I've been hearing privately, I mean, he's certainly very impressed with a lot of the guys that he has there and their ability to pick up the system, because, well, football's football, and, they're not necessarily going that far away from they ran plenty of nickel anyway. Maybe they were a little bit more of a base 4-3 and now more of a 4-2-5. So it's not like that they're having to sit there and learn how to drive backwards or something, but, there certainly are going to be some changes. I think that we're going to see some changes in terms of some things that they may be looking to recruit. I mean, certainly the Leo position, certainly, what it is they're looking for in safeties. I think we're already seeing it in terms of the fact that they could take up to 5 safeties in this class out of necessity and just the importance with having 3 on the field. I don't think you're going to see them, load up on Sam linebackers who might be on the field 15% of the time. But you certainly need to have somebody when you play at Wisconsin, somebody that comes downhill at you, so you can't completely ignore it. So I don't know if I've necessarily answered the question, but I don't know if there is a definitive answer to it.
Yeah, there's no question that he's dealing with and handling and coaching more talented athletes across the board. And unless they're really not picking up the defense, he's got to be pretty encouraged with the potential of what's going to happen this fall. Not that it's all going to get fixed and be pretty in a top 5 defense automatically. There's much to do, but I got to think that he's working with the best potential defense that he ever has by far. Kevin, not to jump back and forth, but because of the questions, we've already covered some of these topics, but we're going to get back into them. So I think a concern with the potential of abolishing the divisions, getting to a rematch possibility in a Big Ten championship game is, of course, some people are going to argue that, hey, Ohio State, Michigan twice a year would be phenomenal. Bring it on. Others would be, well, you're tarnishing what is the game. And it's no longer the game if they're going to play the next week. And then if you're a glutton who wants not just the 2 matchups, but maybe potentially the 3 matchups, if they're both undefeated at the end of the season, then they split, let's say, 2 games and they're both 12-1, and there's an expanded playoff, then you get a potential playoff game between the 2. Do you think, are you on the side of tradition and purity and sanctity of the game, or bring it on, it's just a changing world?
I don't have the graphic in front of me, but there really weren't going to be a lot of Ohio State versus Michigan Big Ten championship games based under what the system would look like. Granted, Michigan didn't have its you-know-what together for a lot of years in terms of its on-the-field success. So, if you take it for what it's worth, and Michigan won the last game and appears to be trending in the right direction, but we'll see what happens without, Hutchinson and Ojabo and Daxton Hill and Hassan Haskins, et cetera. I could go on with the list, whether or not that was a 1-year deal or if they've kind of figured out a little bit of the secret sauce. But, I think it's a lot of worrying about something that we haven't necessarily seen yet. And I know we haven't seen it because it hasn't been something that has been in the cards because of the system. I know that coming out of the 1 versus 2, the 42-39 game in 2006, and everybody wanted to see Ohio State, Michigan play in the BCS championship game. And granted, that wouldn't have been like the following week, but it would have been the next game at that point. And people, Ohio State fans, Michigan fans, a lot of fans were all about it. And there are a lot of fans that weren't all about it as well. But I did go to Ohio State during a time where Ohio State could not win against Michigan. I got to see a tie, but I never got to see a win as an undergrad. So, I come at this from my own unique place as a 50-year-old in this rivalry of what I saw when I was in college. I understand how special the rivalry is. I mean, there's just a lot to it. Do you take a lot away by the potential of playing the next week? Absolutely. I mean, God forbid if you were to play 3 times. I mean, it's hard enough to beat a team a second time. I wouldn't even know what to say about beating a team a third time. This isn't baseball where you have a different pitcher out there and conditions are so different each time around. It's certainly got to be different, but I don't know. I know what I don't want to see. I don't want to see them move the game from the last regular season slot to somewhere else to protect the rivalry that way, because that would just do the opposite. That would crush the rivalry in terms of what it means, whether or not you say, well, we're going to play it, it's going to be the first conference game of the season, or it's going to be November 1 or whatever. No, to heck with that. It needs to remain in its spot, and you figure out the rest later.
Yeah, that would be awful. Just consider, regardless of which side of this rivalry you're on, just think of all the historic after game scenes with the players and everyone rushing the field, and it's just like, that's it. That should be the end of the season. Look at what Michigan accomplished last year. Look at the scene at the Big House. We've seen it many times in Columbus. That shouldn't go straight into a game against Maryland the next week. Like, that's supposed to be it. That's supposed to be, you laid it all out on the line. That's the game. You're done. Yeah, and it's all postseason after that.
It would be a trap game for both teams because, I mean, it's such a meaningful game. You can use all the platitudes that you want to in terms of all of that, but I mean, you come out of that game, you empty the bucket, so to speak, and then you have to go and play Maryland or Northwestern or Illinois or whoever, whatever the case may be, and the odds you come out flat are high because of just the emotion in the other game. And I don't care if Ohio State and Illinois play for a wooden turtle; it's just going to be hard to get up for that game. So the Michigan game is where it belongs.
Notre Dame causing a stir in the chat. That should be a good one in the opener. I saw a graphic, a lot of great graphics out there when you follow a number of college football accounts that just total up things, compile things year after year after year. One that was startling, even when you understand the Ohio State dominance going back to 2005 in the Big Ten. The one that I've never seen listed, but I didn't have to be a brain surgeon to calculate in my mind, is that if you take away 2011, the worst record Ohio State's posted in the Big Ten is 7-1. That's the worst record. That's just crazy. But I saw one this week, Kevin, that showed the winning percentage of all the Big Ten teams versus winning teams with plus 500 records. Ohio State was still at 88% winning percentage against good teams over 500. The next best was Michigan State at like 56%. Michigan was 30-40 against winning teams. This was going back 10 years. It just showed, again, the separation in the conference has just been, it's been more so than what you can count in championships.
Well, you look at the overall picture where Ohio State just doesn't lose a lot of games, period. And then if you sit there and you take a subset of it, it's just not like suddenly they're going to lose a lot more games. And then you look at the games that they've lost, and especially in conference play, you can go back to the foibles with, Purdue and Iowa, and neither of those teams were necessarily great. Ohio State comes out and, when it is a big game, generally takes care of its business. If they're able to roll out a healthy roster, and we're not in the middle of a, international crisis in terms of what your roster looks like due to health. So, I think the biggest thing that shocked me was not Ohio State's record in that instance, but more so where, as you said, Michigan State coming in second, like at 56% or whatever. One team is certainly going to be head and shoulders above the rest. That's just the way it's going to work there. But the fact that nobody else was, 60% was kind of shocking.
Don't know if you caught any of this, Steve, but I was just bringing up, more metrics to outline Ohio State's dominance in the last 15 to 20 years in the Big Ten. One would be, and I totaled this up in my head real quick. I went through the last 10 years. Ohio State's 76-5 in the Big Ten. Wisconsin's number 2 at 59-23. That's the gap between 1 and 2. But this one really hit me. I think 247 Sports posted this on Twitter. Against winning teams with winning records, Ohio State still winning 88% of its game in the last 10 years. Michigan State's next at 58%. There's no other team in the Big Ten over 50% winning percentage. Michigan's like 10 games under 500 against teams with winning records. Buckeyes at 88%. Uh-oh. My bad, Steve.
There, you got me. Sorry about that.
Gotcha. Go.
I may have done that myself too. I don't know. But at any rate, it is crazy, the stat, the run Ohio State has been on. If you look at it 5 years, 10 years, and even back to Jim Tressel starting in 2001, there are some other metrics over a 20-year period that are just astounding. But most particularly in the Meyer era, because they just simply did not lose games unless they were under extraordinary circumstances or to amazing teams, in a lot of cases, rarely upset. And again, it speaks to their dominance. I think that this is something that we're seeing with recruiting and the NFL draft every year that just perpetuates itself year after year after year. And one great quarterback begets another, which begets another, and so on and so forth. And it kind of is a trickle-down effect, I guess, at all these positions. And it's individually each position coach, it's individually each player, each prospect, and then collectively the offense, the defense, and the teams have just been among the very best in the country for a long time. And there's no reason to believe it's going to stop anytime soon. I mean, when we talked about Raiola earlier, they're now set at quarterback through 2026, provided he stays 3 years. You had the Montgomery kid from Ohio who is supposedly blowing up really big for 2025 class. If he comes on, now you're set there through 2027 or even 2028. So you've got the most important position in the sport locked up and under control, theoretically, for the next 6 years. You've got the coach locked up in a lucrative deal. There's hardly anywhere he can go and make any more money. Maybe the NFL, if Jerry Jones paid him $20 million a year or gave him general manager title or something stupid, and I just throw him out there. I didn't mean to say that your boy Jera would go after Day, but
better than who they got now. I mean, Jim and Christmas.
At any rate, you guys know what I'm saying. There's 4 jobs on the planet that he could leave for that would be better than this, and they'd have to pay him a lot more money. So he looks like he's in there for the long haul. They all do. The assistant coaches all seem like they're locked in, and I don't think Kevin Wilson's burning to go anywhere else, and particularly not if they're going to pay him $1.5 million or whatever he's up to now. Jim Knowles is up to $2 million. We'll see if he's worth all that this coming year. Brian Hartline's worth his weight in gold, obviously. So they've got the machinery in place. Mark Pantoni, Mickey Marotti, everybody else that's in place. They've got the machinery in place. You put out 3 first-round picks every year, you're not going to have any problem getting talent. So in some years more, in some years maybe not as many. But yeah, I'm all good with it.
This should be on fever pitch in the chat here come the week of the Notre Dame game, because they're ready to go at it right now. All right, Kevin, I was going to take us in 2 other directions, but that's good. I want you to have your say. Where are we going with this?
Yeah, go back to the previous comment from Corey D.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Basically calling Ohio State Notre Dame's little brother.
Yeah.
I respect the history of the Notre Dame program. I don't want to come out and sound like somebody who only recognizes what they've done the last 15 years, which is nothing, except lose bowl games and lose meaningful games. Notre Dame made its hay during the radio days. It had the only national contract. It was the only thing that you could hear when you weren't listening to Little Orphan Annie or the Lone Ranger or whatever, as you were all huddled around the radio. But you know what? Don't let the fact that NBC made a bad deal to have this national television deal get to your head. I mean, because once Notre Dame starts winning some things, I'll come back, contrition, all that good stuff at this point. But there's a lot of chest thumping and false bravado coming out of Notre Dame right now, when I'm really struggling to talk about what Notre Dame's biggest win in the last 10 years has been. I really don't know. I don't know. They haven't been able to be in the same area code as Ohio State in those few head-to-head matchups. I mean,
they beat Clemson without Sunshine Lawrence. That's it.
There you go. Outside of that, so you know what? I understand good nature ribbon in a chat or whatever, and I'm gonna get labeled as, once again, the guy that sits there and takes it a little too far here on the show. But that's fine. I'll wear that one. I don't care. But it's if we're really talking about the status of these brands right now in terms of college football, I mean, it's not even close. It's not even close between Ohio State and Notre Dame. And, them's the facts.
If you're just talking about what's being produced on the field, and sometimes I have to give Miami fans a reality check as well, like 57% winning percentage in the last 15 years, et cetera, no conference championships for 18 years, all of that. With Notre Dame, what has Notre Dame been in the last 25 years, since almost 30 years since they last won a major bowl game against Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl in 94? They've been not even Wisconsin. They've been, I don't know who to match them up with. Oklahoma State, are they, Ole Miss? They're North Carolina. They're not Penn State. If you're just talking about wins and losses on the field. Now, Brian Kelly has raised them to a certain level, but still knocking on the door of the elite, but not able to win significant games. No question.
And you sit there and you look, Circa just came out with their line, and it's in line with everybody else. Ohio State's a 14-point favorite, and a lot can change now between May 25th and whenever they play at start of September. But that's a big line at this point in terms of a futures line for a game that's still several months out. And you know what? Again, there's a reason you play the games. Nobody thought that that Appalachian State was going to beat Michigan, and I'm certainly not calling Notre Dame Appalachian State. That's not my intention. I'm just saying, you got to play the games for a reason. They've got to happen. But the odds makers are trying to find a way to get money on both sides, and the only way that they're going to be able to get money on both sides is by giving Notre Dame 2 touchdowns. Vegas wasn't built on being suckers themselves. They're built on you being the sucker. So, you know what? Lay all them. Take Notre Dame in the points, but I have a feeling that you're going to be separated from your money, because I see Ohio State winning this one by 20 plus.
I've got 2 national topics that could save till next week. I know Kevin's got to run here in the next couple minutes, and again, they will hold till next week. But they hit on Ohio State by extension. One would be, the theatrics, the entertainment of the Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban, that caught everybody's attention. It was entertaining to see these guys going at each other's throats. I cannot remember in any sport 2 coaches being this blunt about their, kind of hatred for one another and really accusing each other to that extent. That aside, what do you take from that, Kevin, in regards to the overall landscape? Of course, Saban's lead got buried because he attacked Jimbo and Dion, that this is not sustainable NIL, and whether that's meaning he can't compete in it or he truly doesn't believe it's good for college football.
I'll leave some of the red meat there for Steve. I won't take all of it. But the funny thing is that the initial statements were given at a $1,000, $5,000 a plate booster dinner at Alabama. So in a lot of ways, I think Nick Saban's purpose was to get people to open up their wallets and kick some money in. And if he would have done it without naming any coaches, things would have been just fine. It would have just been part of the game. I don't know if there necessarily would have been any reports that came out of it, but he sits there and he singles out Jimbo Fisher. The 2 of them work together. They certainly know each other. And then, all hell breaks loose. The name of God is invoked, and see how your God is doing things, and it just all spiraled downhill. And then Greg Sankey has to get in and separate all parties. And I think the greatest crime of all of that is that Lane Kiffin wasn't allowed to go on the Dan Patrick show the day after and be able to give his view of this whole situation, because that probably would have been the crown jewel in this tiara of discontent.
My feeling is pretty simple. We don't cheat. Everybody else cheats, but we don't cheat. And nobody connected with NCAA sports will ever pick up the phone and call Indianapolis and report somebody for cheating. But rest assured, everybody else who beats us for Prospect Day is cheating, but we do not cheat. That's the standard government issued line from every one of these coaches, up and down the line, side to side. I think that the entire issue needed to be just summed up very simply, and Nick Saban would have been so much ahead of the game if he had said, name, image, and likeness is here to stay. We embrace it. Our quarterback made a mint on it in his Heisman Trophy season. Congrats to him. He's got one more year of indentured servitude with us, and then he can go to the NFL. Good for him. But it was not intended to be an inducement for kids to pick a college. And that's where it's crossed over into whatever it is that happened at Texas A&M. And Jimbo Fisher is doing the plausible deniability that I didn't know nothing about it. I'm Jimbo Fisher. Look at me. I'm a hilljack. I'm one of you, or whatever his little shtick is that, that gum and all that. I mean, whatever, act like he's got an IQ of 5. And sometimes it seems like he's got an IQ of about 5. But, nobody believes that they just, it's like my in-laws race horses. And like when they get beat by a horse that's obviously been juiced, they're like, our horses are on oats and water, whereas some of these other horses are on whatever performance enhancing drugs are out there. And Texas A&M's recruiting wasn't on oats and water. Let's just say that. So, it just, that's the crux of the entire issue. And until the NCAA comes up with hard and fast rules and penalties for people who go around, the outside and come up with these workarounds to get kids to go to colleges, which I'm not even sure what can be done at this point. Toothpaste seems to be kind of out of the tube. There's no leadership in the NCAA. The guy, I always forget the name of the guy who's retiring now, who's made $100 million there as the
Mark
president.
Emmert.
Mark Emmert. His name is just, I keep thinking Miles Brand, but he was the guy we kicked around a decade ago. Mark Emmert. People kick around Mark Emmert. Mark Emmert just did what the colleges wanted him to do. He was just their puppet. And the NCAA is not the NCAA. It's not bureaucrats. It's not this evil Darth Vader empire in Indianapolis in a Death Star. It's the will of the colleges. And the issue is there's no leadership it's kind of like our Congress. There's nobody building a consensus, a majority consensus of this is what the rules should look like. There's no leadership. And Mark Emmert certainly wasn't going to do that, because if he had raised his hand and said, why don't we try this? Then the presidents at, for lack of a better term, Michigan, Alabama, Texas Tech, and a few others would have said, no, we don't want that. And then it's dead on arrival. So, it's a herding cats. You can't get anybody to agree on anything to put anything in place. So, until they build a consensus and can get a, 80% majority vote on whatever the rules need to be, it's going to continue to be the Wild West. But I said this on 97.1 radio this morning. One of the few things Dabo Sweeney has ever said that I agree with is we are going through a state of transition this 3 or 4 years of all this stuff, NIL, transfer, portal, etc. And we're going to come out of it on the other side with a better sport. But getting from point A to point B is going to be a lot of trial and error, and a lot of stupid things are going to be formulated. They're going to be proposed, and they're going to need to be shot down. And you're going to have to build consensus. The Big Ten is going to have to go to the SEC. The SEC is going to have to go to the ACC. The ACC is going to have to go to the Pac-12 and to the Big 12. And the 5 of them and Notre Dame are going to have to sit down and hammer out, this is what it's going to look like from the year 2025 going forward. And until we get to that point, Wild West.
We'll save our other national topic. I would like to hear from everybody next week. One note I have or recommendation for Jimbo Fisher, regardless of the conversation, calm down, stop flailing the arms. You're going to be taken a little bit more seriously if you can just present a bullet point rationale instead of just kind of ranting off all over the place. And the other thing is you lose all credibility when you completely do not acknowledge NIL at all. Say that you're working within the rules. NIL is legal. You are working within the guidelines. We're doing all the right things, but don't act like it doesn't exist. That's just stupid, and people are smarter than that. All right, Kevin Noon, Buckeyes Scoop. Kevin, anything you need to plug before we leave? Because we certainly want people to join what you got going.
Yeah, you can find me. There you go, at Kevin_Noon on Twitter. You can find me on the Big Me Kickoff on all of the podcasting platforms. And here just this week, I'm running our 5 questions features from Southern Swing, topics that we've already run. We talked to about 20 players from the states of Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. We asked them when the new NC2A video game comes out, what should be your highest category and why? We asked them if they could have one meal and one meal only, what would it be? What was the third one? Oh, and if they were going to make a movie, a big screen picture about your life, which actor would play you? And some of the answers were pretty hilarious. We got 2 more coming to finish off the week. Be sure to check them out.
Steve.
That's a lot of fun. Just bucknuts.com. I am, again, if I didn't say it earlier in the show, so glad to be back in the United States of America and greatest country on God's green earth, despite some of the things that have happened here in the last 5 years, last year and yesterday. But we're going to get there. One of these days, we're going to get there to where we all want it to be. As said about college football, it's going to take a process. But at any rate, bucknuts.com, at Steve Hellwagon on Twitter. And, counting the days down. It's May 25th. We are 3 months and a couple days from the start of the 2022 college football season. And believe it or not, I went out today and picked up a copy of Lindy's Sports Preseason Magazine. Memorial Day weekend coming up. You always know the first magazine or 2 will be on the newsstand. And I'm going to go get in the hammock and sit back and read about what Boise State's going to do this year or whatever. So
sounds like I'm running to Barnes & Noble shortly after we finish the show.
It's at the one at 256, Kev. They've got a whole stack of them. I was there.
Well, that's the one I'm going to. So
all right.
After I finish this call, after this, I'll have it, and we'll text about it later.
I'll be grilling you guys on UTEP and Tulane next week.
There you go.
All right. Steve's the best. Kevin's the best. Tony as well. We appreciate these guys each and every week. And yes, I do have to state it here. Next show is ish again at 5 p.m. Eastern time. See you then.